Here's a challenge for you. After you finish watching this video, go to your kitchen and open the fridge. Then try to find something that has been produced outside of your country. And if you're watching this video from a European country, try to find some product produced outside of the European Union. I bet you probably can't even find one. Maybe this doesn't surprise you. Well, if you think about it a little more, consider that your mobile phone has been manufactured in more than 20 different countries. The trousers you're wearing right now were probably manufactured in a country like China or Bangladesh, and maybe the company you work for is also foreign. I mean, there's no surprises there, right? I mean, we all live in a globalized economy. Nonetheless, food is the exception to the rule. Agriculture is an industry that is completely protected from foreign competition. And make no mistake here, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. In fact, if you think he's the creator of trade wars, well, you're actually absolutely wrong. Actually, the primary sector exists in a never-ending Cold War. That's why, from time to time, we see headlines like this one.
Trade war rips through farm world. Soybean hog prices fall.
Or maybe this one.
EU cuts import tariffs in a bid to end banana wars.
But there are more than tariffs here. In fact, tariffs are just one of the many tools used to attack foreign markets. And they're not even the deadliest. Here's an example. America spends more than $20 billion a year in subsidies for their farmers. Sound like a lot to you? Well, not compared to the whopping $72 billion that the EU spends in subsidies every single year. And now you might be wondering, but, well, what do the subsidies have to do with trade wars? And the answer to that is, well, a lot. For example, this milk rake you see on the screen here is worth an average of 60 euro cents in a Spanish supermarket. From those 60 cents, the Spanish farmer would get 30 cents, but his actual revenue is going to be 44 cents. And why is this? Well, that's because the European Union will give him a subsidy of 14 cents per litre. Thanks to this grant, the farmer can sell cheap and still make money. And this is why Europe doesn't need to buy African sugar, despite it being cheaper, or even more surprisingly why American or European producers can smash the competition from African markets despite their having higher wages. But hold on a minute here, because things are about to change, and this time the free market champion is not America, it's not Japan, or even Australia. Dear viewer, despite what you might expect, if there is somebody willing to start an agricultural liberalization, it's actually the European Union.
Emmanuel Macron breaks French taboo on farm subsidies.
A French president questioning these subsidies on farming is like a hipster closing his Instagram account. It's something that's never been done before. For years, the so-called Common Agricultural Policy, also known as the CAP, has been one of the pillars of the European Union. And France is, by far, its biggest supporter. But like I said, things are about to change. So now the question becomes, is Europe really ready to liberalize its agricultural sector? Are we about to see the end of the food trade wars? And most importantly of all here, is this good or bad news? Well, in this video, we are going to answer all of these questions, but before we do, let's take a look back at the history.
What is CAP used for?
Let's imagine that we have a wheat farm in Essex in the UK. We harvest the crop and go to sell it to the market. Last time we received £175 per tonne, so it makes sense to expect to sell it for a similar price this time around, right? Well, actually, no. I mean, maybe this time the market price for wheat is actually just £150 per tonne. This is a reality that every farmer faces every year. By contrast, the price of an iPhone, it doesn't really change much over time, so if we sell iPhones, we can make good predictions about our income. But wheat, corn, oil, or any other commodity can change their market price from one day to the next. And now you might be wondering, well, why? Why does this happen? What's the difference between wheat and an iPhone? Well, the difference is that commodities They're the same everywhere. Maybe you ate some bread today. Could you tell me where the wheat it was made from was produced? Well, probably not. The same goes with the oil used to produce the gasoline that you put in your car. You don't know if it's Saudi or Canadian, and you don't really care. You just want it to be as absolutely cheap as possible. Nonetheless, there are just a few dinosaur juice producers. Meanwhile, there are many producers of wheat, corn, and potatoes. So if one big producer had a good harvest, that's going to affect that market price for everybody. And then, of course, you've got to add to this the weather. Too little rain, too much rain, or an unusually cold winter can be enough to kill off all of your revenue. Nonetheless, we need agriculture because, unfortunately, you cannot eat oil or iPhones. So, how can we keep eating while farmers don't starve? Now, this might sound like a stupid question, but believe me, it's actually one of the hardest problems in economics. And, well, this is where that common agricultural policy that we mentioned comes into play. This is how the European Union protects their farmers. When we talk about the CAP, we're talking about the cornerstone of the European Union. It was a thing even before the Schengen area or the Eurozone were even born. Actually, do you know who the father of the CAP was? Well, yep, it was that French president Charles de Gaulle.
A nation has no friends, only interests. Charles de Gaulle.
Now, if you've been subscribed to VisualPolitik for a while, you already know that Charles de Gaulle was not exactly a big fan of the free market. Well, actually, he wasn't really a big fan of anyone except himself, really. This is why, when France became a member of the European single market, what would later become the European Union, he added a condition. He basically said, alright, we're going to sign up, but you've got to promise us that nobody's going to become our competition for farmers, alright? And basically, that's how the CAP was born. A policy that is so interventionist it makes Bernie Sanders look like Warren Buffett. Basically, in order to compensate for potential losses when market prices go down, the European Union gives them direct cash. For example, if you have a barn with cows in Spain, Brussels will still give you cash straight away for each and every cow that you own. And if you want to buy a milking machine that is going to make you more productive, well, Brussels is going to help you with that too. This way, Europe is not only guaranteeing your income, but it's also helping to protect you from American or African producers. And as you might have already imagined, all of this aid costs a shitload of money. So if you want to get a better idea, during the 1990s, the CAP comprised 80% of the whole European budget. And even now, when Europe is bigger and it's got more stuff to do, the CAP still makes up 40% of all EU spending. And surprise, surprise, I guess, which country receives most of the aid? Of course, it's France. But hold on just a moment, because things, they do not stop right here. Beyond direct aid, Europe also has other tactics to avoid price fluctuations, as well as quotas and tariffs. For example, in order to avoid a price drop in milk, Europe used to put a production limit on each country. That means that you couldn't produce more than a certain number of litres. And, of course, who was benefiting the most from these production quotas? Well, of course, it was the country of croissant and baguette. As you can imagine, this milk quota created all kinds of problems among the other members. And this is why, despite French pressure, Europe had to put an end to all of this.
End of European milk quotas. A new era for the French dairy sector.
And of course, we also have the tariffs. Tariffs, they're like sniper bullets, designed to stop very specific products from getting into European markets. For example, imagine that you are an Argentinian coffee producer. If you want to sell your raw coffee, meaning you take it from the plant and sell it, Europe, they got no problem. Zero tariffs for you. And why is that? Well, it's because no European country grows coffee. But if you want to sell this coffee in its already toasted and processed form, well, good luck to you. You're going to have to pay a tariff of 7.5%. And why is that? Well, because Europe has factories that process and toast coffee, and they just don't really like competition. But I know what you're thinking right now. Oh, that evil European Union, they're punishing the third world. Those Brussels bureaucrats, they just want to destroy free trade. Well, I've actually got bad news for you, because the reality is that every country on the planet does the exact same thing. In fact, when it comes to tariffs, Europe is actually one of the most open regions. For example, if the same farmer wants to sell his coffee in Japan, he's going to have to pay a 20% tariff. If he wants to sell bananas, then he has to pay between 40 and 50%, depending on the season. And what about America, the land of the free? Well, it's actually kinda the same there. Almost no country is willing to leave its farmers alone in order to compete with fair competition. Nonetheless, all of this can change. And why? Well, let's have a look at that.
Bad times for protectionism.
Every year, Europe spends over $72 billion subsidizing its own farmers. But as you can imagine, not all the country members pay the same amount. Just have a look at this chart. Here you can see the main contributors, that is, the countries that pay more than what they get. And surprise, surprise here, who is the third biggest CAP net contributor? Well, of course, that's the United Kingdom. The country that will no longer be a member of the club. As you can imagine, this leaves a hole of more than 12 billion euros. This is why many are suggesting that other countries have to start paying more to keep the spending where it used to be.
The European Commission urges EU countries to pay more into budget.
Nonetheless, who really wants to pay more? It's a time when Eurosceptic parties are stronger than ever, and no politician can really come back to his own country and say, hey, guess what, guys? Whip out your wallet because we got to pay more for being in the EU. It's not going to go down well. So, if you do the math, you realize that there's only really one option left.
Brussels plans to cut its payments to Europe's biggest farms.
Basically, Europe had to reduce the direct aid given to the farmers, and they have started with the wealthiest ones, since they're the ones who needed them the least. But the biggest surprise came with Emmanuel Macron's speech. Everybody in Brussels might expect France to come out as the biggest old-school CAP supporter, right? But Macron, well, he's got other priorities, and this means a green light to cut aid in the future. Meanwhile, trade deals are being struck in fashion.
EU and Mexico agree to new free trade pact.
Yes, and we're not only talking about Mexico here. I mean, look at this news.
The European Union rushed to promote its preliminary free trade agreement with Japan by stressing the benefits for EU farmers.
Yes, dear viewer, slowly the European Union is reducing subsidies, reducing tariffs, and getting rid of production quotas. And I know what you're probably thinking right now. You're thinking, come on, Simon, are you really telling us that Brexit is the only reason for this change? Well, no, I'm certainly not. In fact, there are two other important reasons. On the one hand, European agriculture is already more productive than elsewhere. In this video, we told you about the Netherlands being one of the biggest agricultural powerhouses. In fact, they have what we call the Food Silicon Valley. In fact, Camembert cheese or Ribera del Duero wine can be found almost everywhere, and they all come from Europe. In other words, Europe doesn't need to protect its own market anymore, but instead sign lots of trade deals. And I know what you might be thinking right now. Will farmers be happy when they stop getting all of these subsidies from Brussels? Well, the reality is no. But the question really is, does it actually matter? Look, peasants' unions, they used to have a big political grip. During the 60s, when de Gaulle was the French president, France had millions of people working in the primary sector. Now, there aren't even 3% of the population working there. This means way less political sway and way less votes. But not only that, who do you think these European farmers vote for?
France's disillusioned farmers turn to Le Pen.
Exactly. Basically, the biggest place for Eurosceptic parties to get their votes are rural areas where farmers live. So if you're a European politician and you want to make your voters happy, you really kind of do want to pay more attention to the urban Europeanist voters instead of the rural Eurosceptic ones. And come on now, because the average city guy, they don't know what the CAP even is. And this leads us to our question for you. Does the CAP have any future whatsoever in Europe? Will we see greater liberalization of agriculture in Europe as well as the rest of the world? Well, please leave your answer in the comments section below. Also, please do visit our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page where you can support our channel and gain access to some exclusive content. And also, as always, give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.